I was left without a community, without the bonds that I was so familiar with. And that's a transition that a lot of veterans really struggle with, is the initial discharge. The church has something to learn from the military. The military does a great job, perhaps the best anywhere, of creating communities of meaning. Now, since the Crusades, that meaning has been tied up in willingness and perhaps eagerness to do violence, and that's a corruption. But it has, and it still does, an excellent job of creating places where human beings feel connected. We want to be honest about our own traditions. We have to acknowledge that that service members, the military, are not just some problem over there. It is our problem. Suicide in the military is not some external thing that needs a solution. It is our problem, because 18 of those 20 suicides every day are by people identified as Christian. I think that soldier suicide and military suicide is a judgment on the church for failing to acknowledge or to even see a problem with which it has been fully complicit. The bond that the military creates is something that the church rarely achieves. And there's something in that is good. But the corruption has come in, besides the illusion or the lie that we have to do violence in order to belong, but also on the individual level. We are not given the space to actually be and feel fully human. We're either made to be heroes or we're made to be monsters. And that is the corruption of society, being unable to reconcile the alienation that it has been a part of, that it has created as an outgrowing of, the end of the draft, maybe. I don't know. It's easy for soldiers to say, yes, I've done some bad things. We love talking about it, but we don't like talking about civilians being culpable as well in the world in which soldiers feel the way soldiers feel now, of being unable to move beyond the corruption into redemption, because they aren't able to see how they are and have always been human. And it's a hard pill to swallow for civilians, that they may not have done anything themselves, but they are part of a system that has made soldiers and veterans feel like death is the only way. Paul, in his letter to veterans, which is Philippians, he says, I desire to depart and be with Christ. That it's better to leave. And I know vets personally who have said that, who have literally said, I'd rather die. Dying would be better than putting up with this bullshit, than being accused of this or not having that, whether it's from custody battles to just, career opportunities. What the way that society has lost sight of what it means to be a service member, the value of service in our community. And I mean, it's no secret that armed service, whether that's in the military, police force, has been corrupted. But the concern that I have is that this gap that we continue to fertilize with shit is only going to get wider and wider, and we're not going to see, I don't think, any positive turn until we're able to actually see and embrace service members and veterans as fully human. And that, I think, requires civilians to do the difficult work of listening to soldiers and veterans say the things that they have to say, that often include society is unwelcoming to me. I do have hope that it's happening, but I think the questions, the framing questions, are just slightly off. And I think that the difficult questions that are self-indicting, I know I've had to ask myself that. I don't know if I've killed anybody. I'm an artilleryman. I don't know if I killed anybody, but I'm pretty damn sure I did. And a lot of soldiers and veterans know what it means to ask those questions of yourself on a daily basis. But that same self-indictment, we have to come to terms with it in terms of the civilian, the military civilian divide. And largely civilians have not shown themselves to be able to ask those questions and risk that privilege, or even expose that privilege to, clear air, so that we can actually have a better conversation. We have to be willing to face one another, and we have to be willing to endure one another's pain. Like, we talk a lot about dividing grief and multiplying joy, but like, there's some real difficult shit that Christians largely don't like to deal with, that veterans have no choice but to either bottle it up or to keep it within our own circles. And that, I think, is theologically and socially incestuous. So to open up spaces has to be prepared for some really harsh words and harsh questionings and self-indictment on the part of Christian civilians that want to do good and who typically are, well-intentioned. Just, they need to be able to listen, and getting to that point where veterans are heard. That goes both ways. Veterans have to be willing and able to share it, and a lot of them aren't, but we aren't typically, because when we do, we get shut down. It says something about us, that the people who feel strong enough about our ideals to fight and die for them, when they're done, they don't want anything to do with everybody else. Says as much about us as it does about them, I think. Doing the right thing requires sacrifice sometimes. And soldiers, the violence that we think, or they think they have to do aside, the sacrifices they're willing to make, I don't see reflected in the church. We don't want to sacrifice anything.